deterrence. Then there are qualitative issues. If you have such a gap between what is needed and what would be on offer, you need to have very good intelligence to be able to apply your forces in a proactive and intelligent way. You need to know in advance where things might go wrong. You need to be able to detect the plans of troublemakers and spoilers. That intelligence, except for rare occasions where some member states provided intelligence, is not there. You need to have mobility, because you have to compensate the lack of, the insufficient numbers by a capacity to have very good tactical mobility. It's not there. You need to have very good training, because there's nothing more difficult than this gray area where you have to be able to to have great discipline of fire, and at the same time to be able to control an escalation. That requires not a soldier minus, but a soldier plus. You need to have very good troops for that. And you need, of course, to have the equipment, so that the soldiers are not scared, because if they are scared, they will have less discipline of fire. So from flak jackets to APCs to night go, I'm not going to get into the technicalities of all that, but a well-equipped soldier will be a much more effective soldier, not just to kill, which is not the goal of peacekeeping, but to protect himself and to protect others. He will be much more effective. You need to have different command and control arrangements. There is an element there that is linked to the rules of engagement. And it's already in the Brahimi report. And there, it's not very well resolved, because it's a delicate political issue. When you're being shot at, do you shoot at those who shot at you, or do you go after, let's say, the command center of those? Command center for a militia looks a little too sophisticated, but some of the leaders who are behind that attack. The rules of engagement are often ambiguous on that. There are ways to get around that. And I stand by what I said, that I don't think that's the ceiling. But conceptually, there is no clarity on what needs to be done there. But the real command and control issue is the importance of politics in deciding when to use force, considering all the elements I have described. And that means strong civilian leadership in theater, which is a problem, as was said, with NATO countries, which don't like that, but which is imperative if you want to have proper use of force in those operations. Because if you don't inject the politics at the local level, you're going to make major blunders in the use of force. It means a great deal of decentralization between headquarters and the field. There's also a problem with NATO countries, but I think not as much as was said in the previous session, because I think, although yes, NATO had these huge, actually bloated headquarters at the strategic level, in reality, more and more, the person who matters most in Afghanistan is General McChrystal. Yeah, I'm getting there. So I think there is de facto more decentralization in NATO than the NATO countries might admit. But it is nevertheless structurally an issue between the UN and NATO that there is this high level of decentralization in the way the UN operates, and a level of decentralization that is necessary because of the importance of the local political dynamics that you will never understand as well if you are several thousand miles away. And in the case of Lebanon, for instance, the strategic military cell, it's soon discovered that in reality the operation was run and had to be run from Lebanon, because how you're going to, in a village where this dominant Hezbollah influence, when do you challenge them? When do you this is not in New York that you will have the best answer for that. you get the feel, the pulse of the situation if you are in Nakura, if you're in the headquarters of UNIFIL, a few dozens of miles away from where the problem is arising. And last but not least, in this command and control implication, tactical decisions may have strategic implications. Because sometimes you have a roadblock set up by a militia. Do you negotiate your way to that roadblock, or do you shoot your way through it? You know, in some situations, the wrong decision can escalate into a major strategic turning point for the mission, for the positive or for the negative. If you're too soft, maybe that's going to create a chain of reactions that's going to embolden a faction that was just a minor spoiler, and that will gain momentum. Because all these gray areas, it's all about momentum, it's all about the dynamics. And so the tactical decision of a lieutenant in the middle of nowhere confronting a roadblock will have major implications. What is the implication? It means that you need a very well-trained lieutenant. Because you can't, the lieutenant, he may radio to his headquarters, he may get some guidance from that. But at the end of the day, the pulse, the feeling of the situation on the ground, there with the people who are right next to him, matters a lot. You know, recently in Darfur there was a shameful situation of a patrol of UNAMID that just was surrounded by rebels and essentially surrendered their weapons. That is an example of bad command at the tactical level, but bad command that may have strategic implications, because it destroys the credibility of the mission in a big way. So, to conclude, 3 points. First, robust peacekeeping. That is peacekeeping which is capable peacekeeping. It involves more, not less, political choices, because of the need to prioritize the use of limited forces, and because of the political implication of the use of force. And that is the most difficult question, because at the end of the day, what we're discussing, and that was raised by one of the previous speakers, is what is the goal of peacekeeping? Now, in those situations, we're trying to shore up fragile states. So we want, let's say, the goal of peacekeeping is for the United Nations, an organization of sovereign states, to help states consolidate their sovereignty. But what does that mean? Does it mean that we want states that are able to crush their opponents? Or does it mean that we want states in which there are no forces that will take arms to challenge the state? These are two quite different answers. And frankly, in the Security Council, there is not a unity of view on that question. And that's a big question, because the trade-off I was mentioning earlier between being a mediator and an enforcer, in all those gray areas, is it a whack-the-mole game where you crush a little spoiler that shows its ugly head, or is it a political game where you try to draw that spoiler in the tent to be part of a broader political base? This is a political question. Is the Security Council, second conclusion, ready to address those questions? There's always been the perennial demand for clear resolutions, clear mandates. To be honest with you, I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, because it's much easier for the Security Council to have a list of operational details, to count the trees of the forest, than to decide on the concept of the forest. And so I think that doesn't mean that the Council will do nothing about it, but that means that you will inevitably remain with a level of ambiguity in what the Council decides. What is wrong and what is dangerous is the present trend for hiding that this fog in a forest of details. And the longer, and you know, Yugoslavia is a good example of that. The more resolutions, I think, the less strategic clarity. The longer the resolution, the less strategic clarity. That's as a rule of thumb. Unfortunately, that I think is right. Third point, because